Hello, this is Wednesday, July 17th, 2012. I'm Ralph K. Ginorio. Give me a few minutes and I'll give you something to consider. Subject, Gestapo. Recently, Maine's Governor Paul LePage has been criticized for comparing the IRS to the Gestapo in the coming healthcare law. American Jewish groups, Democratic groups, and progressives have basically implied that only a crazy man would go so far as to call the Internal Revenue Service of the United States Gestapo. Consider this. It is true that it is unreasonable and unwise to immediately go to the worst extreme possible in any political debate. And in our society, for very good reason, the National Socialist German Workers' Party is about as bad as it gets in our historical memory. But we've got to understand, the words "never again" mean something. They mean we should, each of us, take as our own personal responsibility the duty to prevent another Nazi takeover, another Holocaust, another world war caused by out-of-control ideology. Now, the Nazis didn't spring into being like Athena out of Zeus's forehead overnight. The Nazis took years to develop. When they started out, they were a bunch of disgruntled German war veterans, furious about World War I, furious about life, furious enough to take the naturally evolved society and shatter it, and build it along new lines that they considered to be wise, and we know how it turned out. It turned out like a charnel house. Only Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin have higher body counts. Only Pol Pot killed a higher percentage of the people under his command. The Nazis are rightly thought to be one of the most evil groups ever, but they didn't come from nowhere. They came from the society that produced Schiller, Goethe, and some of the most beautiful poets and musicians, writers and painters ever. Germany was the heart of culture. Just ask the Germans, they'll tell you, in Europe. They at least have a proud heritage of culture and of thinking in utopian lines about the good of human nature, about the good that is in each of us. And yet they allowed, even elected, the National Socialists. They allowed and aided Adolf Hitler in starting a world war, in exterminating a race of people and all sorts of classes of people that were designated Untermenschen, subhumans. This didn't happen overnight. It took time. After World War II, Jewish groups around the world and humanitarians around the world rightly said we should never allow this to happen again. The Internal Revenue Service, is Obamacare Nazism? Are they a Gestapo? Absolutely not. Yet. But what the Nazis did is they took power away from the German people, away from the other institutions in society, and drew it to themselves like iron filings to a magnet. They peeled away Germans' rights as an onion is peeled away from the surface, layer by layer, and it took time. If never again is to mean something, it has to mean that we will spot this danger in its early stages, before it becomes fatal. Governor LePage is right to suspect giving the United States government so much power as to act as a parent for all of us in terms of regulating and providing our health care. Somebody who pays the bill gets to tell the piper what to play. And somebody that cares for you acts as a parent for you and controls you. This has never been the relationship between America's citizens and its government. Obamacare changes the fundamental relationship between government and governed, making citizens of the United States wards of the state. It will, if it takes effect, transform our lives in unprecedented ways, but in entirely predictable ways. Governments have taken this kind of power in the past. And when you give so much power to an entity, any entity, there is the risk of that entity being corrupted by it, becoming used to the authority. And if that happens, if Obamacare is a wedge to transform relations between the American government and the American citizen, then the Internal Revenue Service, which will regulate how we each get our aspirin, get our heart surgery, how we live our lives, whether we diet or not, whether we exercise or not, all of that becomes a matter for public scrutiny. And if the Internal Revenue Service is going to function as the government body monitoring such, that is the precise role that the Gestapo played in Nazi Germany. No, they're not there now. And God willing, and with the help of the American people, it will never become a Gestapo. But Jewish groups are wrong to demonize anyone who uses that term because they're not full-bore Heinrich Himmlers. Well, Heinrich Himmler was not made in a day. And the way you stop totalitarians is you spot them early, and you fight them in their infancy, and you prevent them from becoming masters of a country or masters of a continent or self-described masters of the human race. We've got to spot them early. So Governor LePage, while shocking, was absolutely right to call the IRS potential Gestapo, given what Obamacare means. Thank you for your time. Be well.